A faint hum echoed in the lecture hall just before the professor spoke, one of those strange, electric moments when everyone senses something is about to happen, even if they don't yet know what. And if you stay with this story until the end, you'll see how a single equation changed 3 lives forever, how a joke became a promise, how a janitor became a legend, and how love appeared where no one expected it. The room of nearly 200 students buzzed with impatience as Professor Hale paced back and forth, chalk in hand. He was an intimidating man, brilliant, sharp-tongued, and famously unforgiving in the mathematics department. Today he seemed even more theatrical than usual. He turned suddenly, scribbling a monstrous equation across the entire length of the board, symbols tangled like vines, numbers stacked like impossible staircases. "Solve this," he announced, tapping the chalk rhythmically, "and I'll marry you." Laughter rippled across the hall. It wasn't the first outrageous challenge he'd thrown at his students, but it was definitely the most ridiculous. Mia Vargas, a senior barely holding herself together that semester, shook her head with a weak smile. Marriage was the last thing on her mind. She was trying to keep her grades up while working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, and taking care of her younger brother, but she looked at the equation anyway, because somewhere beneath the exhaustion, math still comforted her. The problem was impossible. Even she knew that, and yet, someone in the very back of the room stood up. A man in faded overalls, carrying a mop. Janitor's bucket squeaked softly as he stepped forward. No one paid much attention to him, until he cleared his throat. "I think I can give it a try," he said quietly. The hall fell silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Professor Hale blinked, unsure whether to laugh or scold, but the janitor, whose name was Elias, though few people ever bothered to ask, didn't wait for permission. He walked up to the blackboard, lifted the chalk gently, and began to work. His handwriting was calm, confident, beautiful. Even, line after line, he unraveled the impossible equation as though he were simply tracing a memory. Students leaned forward. Mia couldn't breathe. When he placed the chalk down, Elias stepped back. Professor Hale stared at the board, his face draining of color. The solution was correct. Not just correct, elegant. A soft gasp traveled through the room. Mia felt a single tear slide down her cheek, though she didn't understand why. The professor swallowed hard. "No one," he whispered, "should know how to do this." Elias smiled softly, almost apologetically. "I used to teach," he said. "A long time ago." Then he looked toward Mia, straight into her eyes, as though he knew she, too, had been trying to keep herself from falling apart. And in that moment, Mia realized something. He was carrying more than a mop. He was carrying a past. A story. A hurt. The rest of the class buzzed as Elias quietly returned to his bucket, but Mia couldn't take her eyes off him. Something tugged inside her, a curiosity, maybe even a connection. Professor Hale didn't say another word until the bell rang. And even then, his voice was shaken. "Class dismissed." But Mia stayed behind. She walked down the steps of the lecture hall to where Elias was packing up his things. "Hey," she said softly, "that was incredible." Elias looked surprised someone had spoken to him at all. "Just old math," he murmured. "Old memories." She hesitated. "Why aren't you teaching anymore?" He looked away. "Life got complicated." Before she could ask anything more, Professor Hale cleared his throat from behind them. "Elias," he said, "we need to talk." But Elias simply nodded, wished them both a good day, and left. Mia watched him disappear into the hallway, the man who solved the impossible, carrying wounds she couldn't yet see, and she knew, instinctively, that this wasn't the end. He had walked into her life for a reason. A reason she'd discover soon enough. A reason that would test all 3 of them. Hook for Chapter 2. Stay with this story, because in the next moments, old scars will reopen, a hidden past will unspool, and a choice will be made that will bind the professor, the janitor, and Mia together in a way none of them could have imagined. Elias didn't show up the next morning. Not at the lecture hall. Not in the corridors. Not even in the maintenance office, where Mia quietly checked between her classes. Something felt wrong. Professor Hale seemed on edge as well, his lecture stumbling, his voice cracking on words he'd spoken confidently for decades. He kept glancing toward the doors, as though expecting the janitor to reappear at any moment. When class ended, he pulled Mia aside. "You spoke to him yesterday, didn't you?" he asked. Mia nodded. "Just briefly." The professor took a deep breath. "There's something you should know about Elias." But before he could explain, a loud voice echoed through the hallway. "Professor Hale." A security officer hurried toward them. "We found this in the service wing. It belongs to the janitor." He held out a folded letter. The professor opened it with trembling hands. Mia watched, his eyes widen. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just couldn't walk past that equation without remembering who I used to be, but I can't go back there. Not after what happened. Please, don't come looking for me. I'm tired of disappointing people." Mia's throat tightened, Professor Hale's hand shook, and the hallway felt suddenly cold. "We have to find him," Mia whispered. Hale closed his eyes. "I should have done that years ago." They looked at each other, two people who barely knew one another, now bound by someone who had quietly changed both of their worlds. A man who carried brilliance and heartbreak in equal measure. A janitor who once solved the impossible, and who had just disappeared, and so, together, they stepped into the fading afternoon light, determined to bring him back, not just to the university, but to himself. Because some people solve equations, others solve lives, but Elias, he was the kind who needed someone to solve his.